meeting to order. Is there any public comment? Hearing none, we'll move to our topics for discussion for today. We have two. The first one will be Commission for Women Funding Request. Jeanette, Dinah, welcome everyone.
So first I'd like to say thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to be a part of the Commission for Women. We really appreciate that, and we have the chance to promote opportunities for women and girls in Cumberland County. What I'm going to do on behalf of our commission is just go over an overview of what we've done in the past year and what we've part of the prior year and the upcoming year, and then hopefully answer any questions you might have or any things that might present for us. So the first thing we'll talk about is our membership, some programs, some of the outcomes that we've seen, and our funding requests. As far as membership goes, we have on file 6 new applications since the last request that we did. We have 27 active current inquiries outside of those applications. In the past year, we recruited 5 new members, and we're expecting another new member after our October meeting. Total terminated members since the fall of 2016 has only been 6. And our current membership level, I believe, is 18. There might be one less than that, but I have to check on it. So we're about 18 of the 25 that we're allowed to have. Programs that we've done so far this year include elder care and a senior generation program on March 26th. That was at the Messiah Lifeways. We had a Lyme disease program at Dickinson College on April 30th. We presented to the SOS group, which is a resource group outreach for seniors. Yeah, seniors. That was in May. We attended the annual Business Women's Forum in May as well. As a group, outside of our regular activities, we supported domestic violence services in Cumberland and Perry counties by attending their Black Relief fundraiser in August. And our upcoming program at the end of this month is about opioid addiction and the impact it has on kids and grandparents. So that's fun. As far as the elder care program that we offered, just to give you a couple details about that. We had approximately 75 to 80 people show up. I don't have an exact count on that. It started around 6 p.m., lasted to 8. There was dinner served. We had 4 different panelists with Sue Severino, who is an RN with Severino Healthcare Health Advisors. We had Brett Beal from Ella Home Care. I'm sorry, I misspoke there. We had Aviv Blueloss, an elder care attorney. We had Aviv Hope from PA Healthcare, and Laura Establish from Elder Space Organizing. And so that group together did a panel discussion and took questions from the attendees to answer and give resource information out to the group. It was really well attended. We did a post-event survey with Messiah Lifeways and got about a 5 out of 5 rating for the majority of the questions asked and responses. And we had a lot of requests to have the program run again. A lot of kudos from that. So it really reflected well back on us as the group and the county. The TikTok presentation that was offered this past spring was in collaboration with Sam Spoons, which is a nonprofit organization, and also with Carrie Perry, one of our newest members, to give resources and information about the Lyme disease epidemic in Central PA. That was really well attended. We had about 80 to 100 people there live, and then the program was live streamed and had about 700 hits on the live stream after the fact. So really great education piece that we offered to the community, kind of broad. As far as the SOS presentation, that had about 80 different people attending. We got a lot of positive feedback, a lot of questions about what is Cumberland County Commission for Women. So it was a good outreach opportunity for us to represent the group and connect with the community. And then we attended the Business Women's Forum again in 2019. That was held in Messiah College. It was sold out. I don't know what the sold out number means, probably around 300 or so. 500. From that, we had about 30 people ask for more information specifically that we've been connecting with and inviting them to come to upcoming meetings. And we also had a couple of prize winners, and then we had probably good traffic at the table, around 80 people stopping at the table. So a lot of good connections, good thing for us to do. That's just a snapshot of the fundraising event we went to. I reused the photo from last year because we were scattered this year. We didn't all sit at the same table, but there were probably 6 to 8 of us who went and supported domestic violence services, just as a part of the community. And then our upcoming program, the impact of opioid addiction, Cares for the Children. The outcome of that is to be seen, but it is a really important topic that impacts not only the women and girls of Cumberland County, but the whole county itself. It's a huge problem for us. So this time, we're partnering with Videnzia, Cumberland County Children and Youth Services, the YWCA, and some actual grandparents who are impacted by giving care to their grandchildren. It includes a podcast interview that was done with Carrie Perry of Chick to Chick, which is also one of our members. So that will be coming out if it's not already live. We're going to check to see if it's live. Okay. So that's coming out. We're really looking forward to that and excited to be able to offer this type of information and resources. They'll have resource tables at this program also. It's scheduled to take place in the Stern Center of the Wisconsin College, and it's of course open to the public. So we hope to be getting more word out about that and have a great turnout as well. As far as upcoming programs for 2020, knowing that it's an election year and recognizing that voter registration is always a challenge, we're going to do a little outreach on that. I'm going to ask Shelley to talk about that because I haven't really been involved in that discussion.
I would just like to present to the community how they register to vote, educate them on how they learn about candidates, if they want to run for a position, how they would do that in a local office. It's bipartisan. So just basically provide information and education to not just women, but to men and women. So that's my goal.
And so we'll work together as a group to put a program together and do the outreach for voters registration presentation. That's probably going to be mid-March to early April to get ahead of everything. The next topic up there is TikTok. We probably will just do that kind of like we've done with the domestic violence services program. We tend to go as a group and just help out, so that doesn't necessarily require funding. That's just something that we feel is really important. The LEAD scholarship up there, I left it in. I know you had some questions about that. Sandy had told us that it's already supported through some donations to Runaway. I didn't pull it out because we already had the slides. We're still kind of thinking about that, even though it might not be something we will fund, it may be something that we do as a group, or we'll look for another opportunity to provide a scholarship. We feel that's pretty important because we're looking at it as a mentoring opportunity for girls in, the middle school age group, high school age group, to kind of put them on the right path and offer them other opportunities in the county. So, not quite sure how we're going to proceed with that, but I left it in there. And then we'll talk about some other future programs in the next slide and some community volunteering and outreach. So future programs, we talked about voter registration. We're thinking about 2 more programs for 2020, so one in midsummer and one in the fall. Midsummer would probably be something related to healthy eating, sustainable organic farming, possibly connecting with Penn State to take advantage of some of their resources. And then the one in the fall would be potentially a part 3 of the Caring for the Caregivers Next Generation, highlighting mental health awareness. Details are not really ironed out yet because that's way down the road. We tend to plan one program at a time and get through it that way. And again, as far as community outreach, we intend and our goal is to diversify and increase our numbers to reach 25. We're closing in on that, and with any luck, by the end of the year or early 2020, we'll have 25 members. And again, we look to identify any needs or future program opportunities to benefit women and girls in Cumberland County, but also the county in general. So we don't want to limit us just to women and girls. And then cultivating more relationships to support the mission of Farmland County Commission for Women. Any questions?
I do have some questions, I guess. Some of these I see you are essentially the catalyst for the event taking place altogether.
Yes.
And some of the others, it appears at least that the commission are merely participants attending some other event.
Right, so we try to do it as some that we plan and some that we just, as a present, support and promote.
Okay. All right. I understand there's an important role for each of those. The only thing I would mention is that I think some of the discussion we've had in the past was that going back a few years, there was some criticism that the commission and its iteration at that point were simply kind of glomming onto other people's events and providing audience members and not really addressing unmet needs. So the discussion we had as part of the planning was that there are unmet needs out there in the community,
Right.
and we would prefer, I think, as commissioners, to see that the attentions are directed in that fashion. So I simply want to bring that up as a means of cautioning that we perhaps not become just attendees at events.
Oh, absolutely.
Some of these look very good, and there's obviously a lot of topic matter out there that's ripe for use, and where that unmet need does exist. So I would hope that we would continue to see the focus be on that. The only other cautionary measure I can cite is, in the past, I think also there was considerable discussion surrounding the involvement of the commission in anything that could be deemed political. Now, voter registration should be nonpartisan and such, but I know in the past it was also sort of sold that way and somewhat mutated toward being less than nonpartisan, and that created an opportunity for some public criticism and raised questions that the commissioners had to answer as well. So I would simply, with new faces at the table, I'd simply say I'd hope we would exercise extreme caution in terms of any involvement in overtly political items. Also, the Businesswomen's Forum, if it's the same thing I'm thinking of, so that was more or less an event you were in attendance at. Was there any participation in the content delivery or design of the?
It's an event that we have gone to for the past 2 years to build our group. We haven't actually done a presentation at the event, but we used it for outreach and recruiting purposes to let women in the area know that this is an opportunity for them to join the Commission for Women and become more active with us.
All right. There's certainly a role for that. I would simply mention in the past there was this concern about this sort of circular path where the commission members went to events to recruit people to come and join the commission so they could go to other events and so on and so on. It became sort of.
No, it's not our purpose at all.
I realize I'm not consciously being, but that's the reason that I bring up the question of attending versus driving events is that it can be very easy to fall into that because it's a lot easier, but it's also a lot less productive. And there's, some question too on my part that if we are, granted it's a very small amount of money that we provide, but if that amount of money is provided to simply become a pass-through to, well, we're attending events for this group, then I'm not sure what the commission is doing other than simply taking the county's money, which it could very easily give itself, and becoming a mechanism for the transfer without any real thought on our part as to the decision of allocation to those things that the commissioners deem as fulfilling county strategic goals. So that's kind of a long, convoluted way saying that I would prefer to see a balance of those things where we are focused on unmet needs and where the commission is essentially the driver of something that wouldn't otherwise happen. And sometimes that can be a sponsorship because obviously these groups need to accumulate a certain number of sponsors to make it feasible to provide that. The reason the Business Women's Forum caught my eye is because when the Commission for Women was originally founded, it essentially was part of a state program of outreach to women wanting to get involved in owning their own business. That was its primary focus. And they actually had a guiding document on how to start your business and cover all the bases. It was provided by the state, and individual county commissions for women actually customized it. Sometimes they just put their name on the cover, sometimes they made it a little more customized, and then they took responsibility for going out and promoting that specific topic of let's get more women in business, let's help them start their businesses, and that was meeting a role that wasn't really being met by other providers at the time, and the focus really was on business. I assume now that the Business Women's Forum is doing something of that nature, or helping supply support services or something of that nature. So it just strikes me as a little unusual that that was originally the mission of the commission, and now there's someone else doing it, but we're participating in something that we used to kind of have ownership of. So some of this is more for observation, and I'm not expecting a request, but the progress we saw in the last few years toward really addressing topics that nobody else was addressing, I think was very commendable. And I see some of that here. Some of these are very important. Opioid addiction is something that, yes, there are multiple partners doing that, but there's a dire need. There are different audiences to be met in that issue. And the Commission for Women certainly can have a very specialized segment of that audience and have a different take on it than maybe some of the organizations. So I would not say don't do it because somebody else is doing it, but the way I see the mission of the Commission for Women and the way it's been explained to me is that it would serve a very specific role, and I would simply advocate that we continue to look at that type of approach, unmet needs, areas where maybe others aren't doing things, and from a very specific perspective, begin with the audience in mind, and who's the audience we want to meet here. Women who have challenges and may not have access to resources or knowledge and similar resources just through their everyday interactions. As long as we keep that focus, I think that we're going to continue to make the progress that we've all applauded over the last few years.
That's our goal. We're trying to fulfill our mission and keep focused in that direction.
On a very small budget.
Right, it is a very small budget, and I commend you for the work that you're doing. I did want to pick up a little bit though on what Gary said in terms of we want to make sure that we address those areas or needs that are not already being addressed. So when I see in here, for example, the seniors outreach services and the elder care, all that, my immediate thought was, are we coordinating with our area agency on aging and the services that we're providing there? I mean, they have a caregiver support program that's already in place. And what I worry about is we have so many different organizations that are involved out there trying to help. And I'm not sure that everybody has their arms around what everybody's doing. So I think the important thing is that what you do for women and girls essentially is focused on something that's not being addressed.
Right.
One of the things that came to mind, actually I passed along to our chief clerk and my colleagues, was there was an interesting presentation that I heard at the Capital Region Council of Governments, and it had to do with human trafficking. And Harrisburg and this region, and especially here in Cumberland County, we we supposedly are one of the hot spots.
We definitely are.
So, that would be one area that I would suggest might be worthy of the commission's consideration, partnering with those that are involved with that. There's a, forgive me, I can't remember the name of the group that did the presentation at the Capital Region Council.
The big green light operation.
That's it. That's it.
We actually did a human trafficking program about 2 years ago, with the Commission for Women.
Okay.
So, very good chance we could do another one. I actually met with the, person who started Green Light Operation. I had
Okay.
coffee with her the other morning. So I have that connection. We always do look
Okay.
internally, as far as the SOS presentation that we went to, we were invited to present there so that they could understand what the Commission for Women is. So
Okay.
me and Tony Miller, one of our other members, went and spoke with the SOS group to introduce what the Commission for Women is, what our purpose is, and how we do outreach. So that's why that was in there. It wasn't something that we solicited or started.
Okay, well, I mean, that would be like, if maybe the SOS group ought to come to our area agency on aging meetings to find out exactly what we're doing, you know? but-
Yeah.
And maybe they know, and I don't want to be critical, but, you know, yes, I mean, we have a lot of needs out there and limited resources. And we don't give you much of anything in terms of funding. But it's important for the dollars that we spend that we try to make sure that we're, you know, we're not stepping on each other. And that's all, I think that was.
That's
along
what I was
the lines
trying to
of our-
say, so.
On the lines of what Commissioner Eichelberger, you know, what we had talked about before. But if you, yeah, I mean, since, you know, the victims of human trafficking are girls and young women, and I would think that would be something that, to work with whatever other organizations are dealing with that. It's a, you know, it's a serious issue. And I think Green Light, is that what the name?
Green Light Operation, yeah.
Green Light Operation. Yeah. They're involved with a program right now to provide some training to our local police department to recognize, I think, the difference between prostitution and the victims
Yeah.
of human trafficking.
Hugely important.
And then they're also talking about an effort, I think, to provide for some kind of a safe house for victims. So anyway, I didn't remember, I apologize if you were working on that previously, but I think it's a big issue.
It's a huge issue.
I think it's worth noting too, the commissioners certainly are not averse to repeating these things. I mean, an ongoing issue like that can become an ongoing initiative as long as the problem exists, and this problem's going to exist for a while.
I think that's a problem, and we definitely need to revisit, and probably will be revisiting. I met with the person who started the organization, her name is Jordan Collins, a young lady, based over in Cumberland area, I can't think of the name of the church, but outstanding program and a lot of educational resources there.
One other question, we had some discussion last year in regards to the dollar amount that's there and whether or not the commission had the legal ability to raise money for other, so that we would be a supplemental source and you would have a broader resource base rather than simply relying on, you know, a $3,000 stipend or whatever it is now to draw on. You know, was that question ever resolved, Sandy?
I don't think we had an answer to that, because
We can't fund
we
this.
were under the understanding we're not allowed to fund this because we don't
That's
have
what-
a profit, we don't have that.
Okay, I mean, that had been, that was a question that was raised at the,
Right.
but I didn't
And
know if we'd
I
ever
spoke to
actually
Keith.
asked anybody.
Yeah, and I spoke to Keith and they aren't allowed
Okay,
to do
all right.
that.
Very good, thank you.
And, I mean, keep in mind that whatever we're asking for, if we don't need to use it, we don't use it.
Sure.
So if we can come up with another way to do something that's at no cost, then that's what we do. But it's safer for us to at least have some funding to work with, and then
Of course.
we go from there.
Janet, I just have one question. What is the LEAD scholarship?
It is the,
That's the YWCA.
it's the YWCA's designation, it's a leadership. Lead, empower, advocate, and develop. It's a program for middle school girls up through 12th grade in Cumberland County. The YWCA. And it's a year-long program, so they start in September and attend things through the following August. which is one of the reasons why we thought it might be a great opportunity for us through the commission to help mentor girls in the middle school and high school age group. And then we also considered bringing them into the commission for at least 1 or 2 meetings to talk about their experience and interact with us in a mentoring role. So that's what we considered. We're happy to look at another opportunity, but this was the one that looked like it was really well designed. So
No, that's fine, I just wasn't sure what it was.
Yeah.
You guys have any other questions?
No, so you're asking, just so I'm clear, you're looking for just an allocation of 2150, is that
Correct.
first?
Yes.
2020?
Yeah.
Can't do an awful lot with that.
You're pretty creative.
Is there any possibility when we looked at this before, are there any positions for women around the state, 501 section C3?
I think there's at least 1 or 2. I don't know which ones there. Do you know?
There's about 5 across, and basically they're all nonprofits, and they're almost like women organization type of situations that they do fundraising, they do extensive outreach. They hit all ages. Some of them are more focused on a lot of the things that we're doing as well, are partnering with other people into the agencies and stuff like that. So we did do some research on that just to see like what's out there, what's happening. Again, I think because of how our bylaws are and how we are contracted as far as like what we're doing as far as you're giving us monies and funds to do that, they're able to do fundraisers. They're all a nonprofit agency, and they're able to do great deals of like galas and fundraisers. So they do a lot of partnering with the communities as well, and also with businesses in the area as well. So they're talking like 100 members. They have breakfasts like 2-3 times a month as well as dinners.
Where are they located?
One is very successful in Lebanon. The other one is up in the Scranton area. There's one in Pittsburgh, and I believe there's one in Erie that are very active as far as doing things. That's the last time that I did an actual research on that, and that was about 2 years ago.
Well, that might be something to think about maybe in the future then. I don't know.
Sandy, do you have anything?
No, I'm very proud of them. I think they've come a long way, in the last couple of years, and they've done a lot of good things, so, I'm very proud of the whole group.
Yeah, thank you all for your service, it's great. You helped to reinvigorate the Commission for Women, I think, over the past couple of years, so appreciate your service.
Thanks, thanks for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Would the board like to take action on the request?
So then the request is for what we did.
The request is for $2,150.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we earmark an amount, $2,150, for to be drawn on as needed by the Commission.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming out. Come on. Our next topic is follow-up on farmland preservation funding. Stephanie, you can put some numbers together for us.
Yeah, as a follow-up to our last discussion, draw back a particular figure with the goal to how it would equate to a millage. And Dana, fortunately, had a really handy dandy spreadsheet put together that we could basically back into various funding scenarios. And then we used one of our spreadsheets to come up with what acres we might be able to achieve in terms of preserved land. So the table that I believe we all have attempts to summarize what the status quo looks like at $500,000. Commissioner DeFilippo's proposal of getting to 30,000 acres by 2030. Commissioner Herzog's proposal in the Ag Board request of 1% of the general fund budget, again, backing it into a millage. And then also an option for the Ag Board's existing goal of 50% of the ag prime area. So the table gives the equivalent of the millage, then the money that we generate on an annual basis, the annual acres preserved, and then new acres preserved over a 10-year period.
And this is, I'll say, a conservative estimate, does not take into account bargain sales.
That is correct, because it was difficult to imagine how we might estimate that, and I think we teased quite a few of the bargain sales out this year, but whether or not there may be ones in the future years.
Right. It will probably go up and down, I would think, I don't know for sure. Does anybody have any questions? I do know Commissioner Herzog and I yesterday talked about something even, I guess, more simpler than this, not to look at a percentage of revenue or a piece of the millage, but rather just the goal of 30,000 acres and leave it up to finance and so forth as how to appropriate those funds. Pretty much like, I guess, we've been doing it all along. So that, just speaking for myself, would seem to be a little more. Not that the other two methods aren't simple, they are, but it would really put the emphasis on how to do that to staff, which I don't think would be a hard task to do.
So, yeah, and I had taken that original resolution that I proposed and, shared a copy with Vince, shared a copy with Gary. What I was suggesting would be a compromise, but would still get us to where I think we all want to go. And in any event, what it would do is instead of quibbling over whether it's 1% of the county general fund budget or whether it's a certain piece of the county real estate tax, I think the goal of Commissioner DeFilippo's proposal was not to increase real estate taxes. My goal was not aimed at increasing real estate taxes. My goal was to say, hey, we could just do a little bit better, I believe, in the total picture of the general fund budget. So anyway, skip all that, and let's go right to the goal. And so my alternative resolution is that, our planning department, our farmland preservation staff, our finance department, put together on an annual basis what we need to do for certification to the state to preserve at least 1,000 acres annually over the next 10 years to hopefully achieve at least 30,000 acres of prime farmland being preserved in 10 years. So it's taken us 30 years to get to 20,000 acres. We essentially would be, under this suggestion, we would be, enhancing farmland preservation by 50%, but instead of taking 20 years, we're going to take 10 years. That makes sense to anybody. And at the end of the day, I think with this suggestion, from one year to the next, we don't know how many farms we might preserve with the bargain sale. We don't know whether there might be other municipalities out there that are going to follow the lead of Silver Spring Township. And, we don't know what efforts might be made in the next year or two or in the future to actually encourage people to, contribute dollars to our farmland preservation program by designating a piece of their will, to preserve farmland. So we don't know exactly how much might be necessary, but the idea here would be, provide for some consistency, actually to look at the end result, which is the preservation of acres, and I think it was Vince that came up with the idea, let's do, at least 30,000 before we get to 2030, right? And so to me, this would be a reasonable compromise. Now, we all know that at the end of the day, there's no free lunch, okay? And, we're going to have to pay, but at least this would, I think, if we can develop this as policy, and we have other budget policies and other policies in this county, and I just go back to the fact that our comprehensive plan identifies farmland preservation as a priority, that all we're doing is we're saying it as far as our consideration of this resolution, that this is a way that we can enhance the prioritization of farmland in Cumberland County. And it'll end the guessing game from year to year to year to year. I think it's a reasonable proposal, and we could either move to adopt the resolution today, although it doesn't have an official number on it yet, so maybe you want to wait until Monday to make put it in the final form. But I'd be willing to move to adopt the resolution. I think all of us have a copy of it. Vince made a couple of suggestions to it, so I'm willing to go along with Vince's suggestions. But, that's where I am at the present time.
So what's this compromise we talked about that you made yesterday, is that up here on here anywhere?
It was email.
Here you go.
All right, here's it. All right.
I made a couple tweaks.
Yeah, the red lines are Vince's changes.
All right. I'm going to need a little more time to digest this because I'm not sure we've captured everything we need to capture here. I hear what's being said, and what's being said is the same thing as being said before. So, the only way you end the guessing game is by, quote unquote, removing all flexibility, which is a carve out. I've already mentioned that. I think that's inherently unfair. We don't do carve outs for anybody. So, this doesn't. Nothing I've seen here addresses how we're going to be maintaining flexibility, and there are significant budget challenges coming up. We just this past week we're met with another $200,000 for public safety that we weren't anticipating. So I'll just underscore what I've said before. We're not talking about raising taxes, but we are talking about drawing down reserves, which is hastening the time in which you're going to have to be faced with making a tax increase choice. So it's just dispel the notion that we can somehow vastly increase spending on this, and that's not going to cost anybody anything. So there's also, if we're going to do this, then I think we have to ask the question, Kirk, the way you characterized it to me in the past was that you guys essentially are, your hands are full administering the amount of money you have now. If we suddenly double that, I want to know what staff contingency that we're going to be asking to throw on top of this to administer more program.
Yeah, Stephanie and I talked about that the other day. I think where we're right now, the staff definitely have their hands full in terms of administrative program applications, and also the stewardship side of it too with our inspections. We've been pretty efficient at that, but it has taken the entire department to do that, not just one or two people. The entire department, including some of the solid waste staff, have kicked in to help out with that. So it's something we do want to keep an eye on. I don't see anything, Steph, in the what we're looking at here. Anything that would raise a red flag. We need another part-time employee or half FTE for next year.
No. No, but it definitely is of concern, considering the staff that does do the farmland preservation work is already working on the planning side too, so it's a matter of balancing both of those sides and being productive.
But do you see, in this very simplistic term, to set some type of goal, 30,000 acres by 2030, I really don't see much more going on than what's going on now. I mean, this coming year, 1,255 acres, the next year maybe 800 acres. But it just seems like we're gonna get there if we follow the same, or very close to the same pattern we've been on for the last 3 years. Just my observation.
Yeah,
And this puts 30,000 acres for 10 years.
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the things, again, and we don't know, again, it's kind of like this out of ranking order, but still prime farmland that we did this year was a pilot, okay? See how this all works out, everything. I don't know from year to year as to how that's gonna work, okay, but it could. And again, I think there is, you know, there's the opportunity of other sources of revenue. So to actually designate, like, whether it's, you know, again, I was okay with the percent of the 1%. I think that's a small amount of money to allocate for farmland preservation. But, you know, rather than getting into a piece of the property tax or 1% of the budget, let's just shoot for the goal. And that is, you know, to try to preserve at least 1,000 additional acres on an annual basis. Now, I also want to point out, and it's important, I think, that we remember this relative to the cost, okay? In April, I believe, May, we paid off a $4 million bond issue that had gone toward the preservation of previous farm acres, okay? That debt service payment was $427,000 annually. So it's, yeah, okay, so that's freed up money. But it doesn't really, if you consider where we are today, it doesn't really add an additional cost, because if you take the $500,000 that we allocated for the 2019 program year, and you add the $427,830, you're at $927,830 for farmland preservation. So it's really not adding an additional cost burden to the county. At least that's one way you could look at it.
Could you comment on that, Dana? Because I don't think, because it's freed up money, that it's automatically targeted for one specific bucket, whether it be farmland preservation, the prison, or whatever.
And
It's
so,
building the future.
in our
projections.
projections, we knew they, I'm sorry, I didn't know they
No, that's right.
In our projections, we have already accounted for those, it's a decrease in our debt funding, and that's kind of what's helping balance things. So it would be an add to our projections. So while the payment went down, yes, that's a true statement, but in our projections, we already have that projected as going down. So it would increase our expectations over the next year.
So roughly speaking, you know, those dollars are already allocated for
Other
other.
things.
Any debt we
Well,
retire.
you know, if
regardless of-
you're looking at, you know, future beyond, you know, the annual requirement of the budget. But anyway, and we have to have planning, and I understand that. My only point was, sit for how many years now? We've been paying 13 years, right? We've been paying $427,830,000 annually for acres that were preserved in 2006.
And that was an average. A large piece of that $400,000 actually went away in 18. And the final payment was made in 19, because we made a principal payment, the final principal payment. So it
Yeah, but
would
any-
impact the future.
When any debt is retired, whether it's for a prison, or
Mhm.
something else, you don't, you use that money that you won't be paying for our overall debt.
Correct.
Or-
It just rolls back
Yeah.
into, yeah, we
I
don't
mean, I see
say.
what Jim's saying, but realistically, you can't do it that way. I am still convinced that we do the 10,000 for 2030, it's not gonna put us in any financial burden. It doesn't sound like we're gonna need any more staff. And even at that amount, 2030, we're still, as a percentage of overall farmland, compared to, say, Berks and York and Chester, we would still be a little bit lower than where they're at. But it would still be, in my opinion, a significant, a goal that's within reason. So I would support that.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
too? While you're both saying the same thing, you're saying it's slightly different. One is saying $30,000, 10,000 more acres over 10 years, and Jim is saying $1,000 acres per year. How we allocate would be very different under those two scenarios, so I recommend you either say 10,000 acres
Or
over
30,
10
yeah.
years, or 1,000 per year. Because the 1,000 per year locks us into, we're gonna set an amount,
Right.
and we might have 1,400 acres that year.
Right.
Next year, we can't adjust, and I'm throwing out a number.
Well, and I mean, I can sort of address that too, because there's 1,300 acres that are in the pending bucket right now.
Correct.
And that's what's creating the confusion between
Right.
1,000 acres a year for the next 10 years
Right.
and 870 acres
870
for the
about
next
right.
10 years, because that 1,300 is pending. So really, to get to the 30,000 acres, we need 870 annually.
Yeah, so how about, approximately 1,000 acres? The wording can be done, either pick 1,000 per year or 30,000 in 2030. I would support the 30,000 in 2030.
Maybe that makes the most
Yeah.
sense, so there is that flexibility.
Yeah, because some years you may be preserving 1,500 acres and the next might be only 5.
It's much easier to manage to the 30,000 total than it is the annual on that.
Okay.
Because it provides us flexibility for changes in cost per acre,
Mhm.
bargain sales, and other people donating money.
The only problem with the absolute number is that it also robs anybody else an incentive to get into the program. We expressed repeatedly, I have, and others at times, that we want to get other municipalities to do their fair share. And it makes sense on a lot of levels for that to happen. But nobody's going to put their dime in if we're telling everybody we'll carry the full weight, unless you wanted to chip in a little. They're not going to chip in under those circumstances. So that is the one problem that exists. If you said absolute, we're going to hit this number. So there should be some driver that accounts for fiscal realities, including the fact that there's simply, it is a challenge to come up with enough dollars to do that without crowding out other needs.
So just from our side, from the staff side, if we have a goal of 30 by 30, right, 30,000 acres by 30 by 30. So if that's our goal, we know then from the staff level, we can track an annual allocation, what it gets us in terms of acres. So how this would work then, I guess, we would come back to the board each year and say, for this year, we'd like to come back and say, okay, this year's allocation would be $752,000. Next year, then we'd come back with another recommendation based upon 2020's progress and then our projections for 2020. So we'd be giving the board annual progress towards that goal, and I think that allows some of that variability then, Gary. If we do find municipalities want to contribute, or other people have stepped forward, we can reflect that in the amount of the general fund contribution we're looking for in any given year. And we're tracking that each year to show you what we believe is needed, and some of our estimates could change too, if property values go up and down or given year, or if we really get a good crop of farms that are all at the, max out at 4,000.
Well, I think it should be a year-to-year decision. I'm still not sure if I'm hearing you correctly, that if we're committing to the end goal of 30,000, then there's no incentive for anybody else to get in. If we're saying we'll pay everything for it, so.
I think we're setting a goal. I don't think we set the goal to say it'd be 100% from the general fund.
Right.
I think we're setting the goal, and then each year we're coming back and we're asking for help from others to reach that goal. Some years it may be 100% general fund, others it may be contributions from municipalities or even the feds.
And no, that was my point, was if we're gonna say 30,000, are we, like I said, how what's the word, really, is a goal we are striving toward, or is it a goal we are committing to? They're very different things. So some of this is semantics, and I think that's part of my problem with this, is we are vastly simplifying the parts that are complex, we're vastly over complexitizing the things that are simple, so that's not.
We were trying to make it easy, Mary. I mean, that's the whole idea was to, let's not
Well,
analyze this to death. Look, I'm in favor of a policy that establishes a commitment by this county for one of the #1 priorities as echoed by thousands of our residents.
And that's easy to commit to when you're not gonna be here to have to pay for it.
Oh. If you notice at the very end of the resolution, it says that if any board of the future wishes to alter or amend it in any way, they have the ability to do that.
Right, because I don't think.
All right, so let's have a public vote on altering that in the future, okay? Let's have a public vote so that the public knows who's gonna, take this and say, no, we don't need to do 1,000 acres a year. And I don't think we should be, I'm trying to get away from the individual amounts, because the bottom line is, we were told previously to get 1,000 acres a year, we need about $1 million a year. Okay? Now, that's more than my initial proposal. But I'm willing to say that, okay, maybe it won't take that much. Stephanie, you made the comment about, $700 and some thousand because we have 1,300 acres that we're preserving in the 2019 program, okay? But again, we may not have that many bargain sales the next time around. So we're either gonna make a commitment to try to do this, provide for some consistency, or we're not. So, my resolution, I'll be willing to take a look at Vince's suggestion, and, but again, I think that the goal here is to do better than what we've done in the past, if we can, and I think we can.
Could I add, I think there may be a way to do this resolution
There
and
is.
satisfy your need by
There is.
adding maybe a paragraph that says, but we expect and continued progress towards match dollars and municipalities and stuff like that. And the general fund allocation is not intended to be the
Well,
full
then,
support of the
then
program.
again, we're analyzing it to death. If circumstances change, all right, the board has the ability to address that.
I think you can do a resolution, there's nothing wrong with setting a goal and saying, by 30, we would like to have, our goal is that the county shall have, through its own efforts and in partnership with others, we are aiming to hit the 30 by 30 goal. I don't really see how you can go beyond that, because you can't make a binding commitment anyhow for future budget.
The phrase partnership with
We're making
others,
binding commitments all the time, Gary, on the future.
Contractual ones, yes.
partnership with others, that covers it.
Mhm.
We have partnerships with the federal government. We have
That's right.
partnerships with Silver Spring. We hope to have partnerships with, I'm not going to specifically mention specific township, but other townships,
Because the general fund piece is truly just a small piece of what we're putting in farmland preservation. So like,
But
Again, fine with the goal, I just don't think we can pour into concrete the method for getting there and expect that we're gonna have any flexibility or any interest in anybody else trying to help us meet that goal. And I'll just reiterate, we still, we're doing 500,000 a year, it's far more than any of our neighboring counties.
That's true, York County is surpassing us, but in any event, and Franklin County, I think is as well.
No, Franklin is substantially less than us. York County is also much larger than we are,
the budget is huge.
because everything's huge compared to.
Okay, well, and again,
Nice.
we're far behind the leaders, Berks and Lancaster. We have also some of the richest soils, in the world in our county. And, in terms of the 30,000, I would hope we go beyond that with, the other resources that might be available from the federal government with our, because you look back to the recommendation of the Agricultural Land Preservation Board, they wanted us to reach like 50% of preserving all our prime farm acres in the county over, what was the period of time?
25-year period, or 20-year period.
Or a 20-year period. This doesn't get us close to that. And, you know, the bottom line is, we got 100,000 acres, at least 100,000 acres of prime farmland that's waiting to be preserved. And we always have more applications than we have available resources. So, you know, I think we've been very prudent. I don't think any of this, including this proposal, busts the budget. I mean, if you focus in on just this program, and compared to all the other things we spend money on around here, this is very modest relative, really modest. So, I'll be willing to, I'm going to consider Vince's suggestion. And, you know, but I do think I would like to see us do better, and I think now's the time.
I think the policy resolution, whatever you want to call it, can target 30,000 by 2030. Let's see if we can do that. We are all, if we can all, be satisfied with how that verbiage reads. But I agree, we are a little bit behind, and we should be. And this is not going to break the bank. Absolutely not.
Not this year. Kirk, I'm going to re-ask this question. I know you've answered it before, but do we set a difference between, when we identify acres, not all acres are created equally. So even if they're in the critical soils category, aren't there some that are more what I call tier 1 versus tier 2?
Yeah, and our ranking system picks that up. We go through the process. We're looking at the quality of soils, and it's reflected in how high a farm ranks.
So 40% of the
Even
rankings is
even the out of ranking order, Gary, I think was still prime quality soils.
One of the qualifiers to doing the out of ranking order garden sale is that it's consistent with the comp plan, meaning that it's in the ag prime or the ag rural area.
So we say 30, that number, 30,000 acres, it doesn't matter where they fall in that category, it's just.
No, I think I identify the resolution prime.
Yeah, we have, correct me if I'm wrong, about 169,000 acres of agriculture, of which 153 is considered prime. So that's the number we're looking at, I think, right?
I think all of our farms have a blend of,
Yeah.
you know, class 1 and 2, and then lower class soils in them. So I think you'll see whatever's preserved through the program is a blend of soils. But I think every farm that goes into the program, through our ranking system, it's a productive farm. It's a working farm. And that's the key that we want to be focused on.
That's all the questions I have for now, I guess.
Okay. We'll whip up another version.
The 30 by 30 can be a rallying
Yeah.
cry too, a marketing
Yeah.
cry, of course, as we're working with our partners, saying, hey, we're all committed to this. You know, to help us drum up some donations and some other things too. So I think in setting the goal here, it's something to shoot at. Now, Gary,
Yeah.
you said in the past, hey, what are we shooting here? Now we have something to shoot for, and hopefully we can get a rallying cry.
That's fine, and that's one of the areas where I say, you know, simplifying is good. If that's your goal is to set a general number and try to get people on board, have something to point to, and I think that's fine. If you get to the point where you say, it's gonna be 30,000 and anybody who wants to join in, please feel free, but we're gonna do 30,000 with or without you. You're gonna be going it alone.
See, my argument would be a little bit different. I would say, help us get beyond 30,000.
Oh, and maybe it changes in a year or two to that, depending on the type of response.
This is the resolution intended for the county's, you know, obligation commitment plan for its funding for, you know, and if we get more and we're able to, you know, other sources come in and they can be matched with the other funding from the state and federal government that's coming from the local municipalities, all the better.
And frankly, I mean, you know, my concern on this still remains about doing a carve out, because because you're gonna encourage other carve-outs. If this is a recruitment campaign or marketing campaign, which is not a bad way to approach it, then I'm not sure that the county government should be the one doing it. It should probably be maybe the Farmland Preservation Board or a nonprofit associated with it. But, you know, having it, when it's coming from the county government proper, then it sure smacks of the county making a guarantee. And I'm not sure that's a guarantee we can make.
Samantha, this is your area of expertise. Somehow I think you could come up with the right
Just
verbiage here.
thinking.
Because the county must continue its commitment.
Mhm.
There's no question about that. We will be the leader in this program, period, in my opinion. But we do need help from other municipalities. That's a fact.
Mm.
I mean, Silver Spring alone has saved the county a good bit of money. But we use their funds to get state matching funds. You know, if we get a couple, 3 more municipalities. But even at that, it's gonna take a minimum of 2 years to get up and running. Minimum to go through the legal process, the voting, et cetera. Okay, any further comments for now for this topic?
I just hope we can reach an agreement. I'm not sure.
I think we will. Okay, any other business to be brought in front of the finance committee? In front of us? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So,
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you all.